Welcome to the Pacific Northwest Geodesign Forum. I'm Tim Nyergis, Professor of Geography and Director of the Masters of GIS for Sustainability Management. I'd like to take this opportunity this morning for thanking you all for signing up, registering, being here this morning at this early hour. Hopefully a number of other people will arrive in due time, as it would be. And I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the sponsors of the activity. This event wouldn't occur, at least the students, for there is a free lunch in the world every now and again for students. Students didn't have to pay a registration fee. So the 4 colleges from the University of Washington came together, or at least units, I should say, from 4 colleges came together. The College of Arts and Sciences, with the Department of Geography and the Division of Social Sciences, the Master of GIS Program for Sustainability Management within the Department of Geography. From the College of Built Environments, we have Landscape Architecture and Urban Design and Planning that are part of the Planning Committee. From the College of Engineering, we have Civil and Environmental Engineering. And as engineers, sometimes, as it would be, I'm a geographer, a would-be engineer, as the case would be, I think, all these years. The engineers sometimes have a little bit deeper pockets. They didn't even want to bother to go to their dean for money because they had enough to contribute themselves. So that was quite nice for the faculty to get together and do that. From the College of the Environment, we have the School of Environmental and Forest Sciences. And last but not least, the National Science Foundation funded project. It's called the Cyber GIS Project. It goes by the formal title of Software Integration for Sustained Geospatial Innovation.
So our next presenter is Professor Nancy Rottle. She is the director of the Green Futures Research and Design Lab here at the University of Washington. She's also an associate professor. She's the founding director of the Green Futures Research and Design Lab, where her work focuses on design and evaluation of green infrastructure. A licensed landscape architect and over 20 years of practice and teaching, Nancy has led the design of numerous local and national award-winning projects, including the Cedar River Watershed Education Center, the Puget Sound Waterfront Stormwater Solutions, and Open Space Seattle 2100, a multidisciplinary planning process to develop a 100-year vision for Seattle's green network. She's currently co-directing the Regional Open Space Strategy for the Central Puget Sound, or ROS, including an interdisciplinary study to quantify ecosystem services potentially furnished by regional open space conservation and enhancement. She co-edited the 2007 special journal edition of the Places on Climate Change in Place, and in 2009 researched the climate benefits of green infrastructure in New Zealand, supported by a senior scholar Fulbright fellowship. She's lectured and published on the benefits of green infrastructure to mitigate and adapt to climate change. In addition to publishing numerous papers and book chapters, she co-authored the illustrated book Basics of Landscape Architecture, Ecological Design. She's passionate about sharing ecological design approaches and models and has lectured in the US, New Zealand, China, Canada, Russia, and Europe. The next speaker is Jeff Raker. Jeff is a senior planner on the Regional Open Space Strategy, or ROS, for the Green Futures Research and Design Lab here at UW. Jeff has led the development of the ROS for over 3 years. He has managed a diverse selection of programs involving multiple organization types. He has an ability to engage external partners and develop strong networks across different sectors and communities, and has had involvement in both technical planning and business strategy development. He has extensive experience as a planner and economic development professional with the Puget Sound Regional Council. That was actually mentioned earlier. Jeff provides staff support for a regional board of executive leaders and expert technical panels. He has been responsible for providing technical planning to assistance for over 85 local jurisdictions, providing assistance to private projects seeking federal funds, conducting in-depth analytical research, organizing large-scale events, and communicating with the public to solicit insight and related plans, policies, and strategies. In the second 15 minutes, the first presenter will be John Owen, and he joins us from Makers Architecture and Urban Design, and is a member of the American Institute of Architects. And as a partner at Makers Architecture and Design, his professional experience comes from a variety of work, ranging from waterfronts and public involvement projects to site master planning, comprehensive planning, park planning, new town centers, agricultural land preservation, and watershed planning. These efforts have resulted in more walkable, livable, and sustainable communities, and in many cases have led to improved resource management and landscape-scale environmental protection. The common threads running through this diversity of work are a focus on participatory, team-oriented design approach, technical capabilities, and the application of new ideas to the practice of urban design and planning. And our last speaker is Jenny Dugan, and she's a postdoctoral research associate here at the University of Washington and also involved with the Natural Capital Project. Jenny has worked with the Green Futures Research and Design Lab to mentor a group of graduate students in the Environmental Management Certification Program. The group was tasked with providing guidance to the Regional Open Space Strategy, or ROS, on how best to model ecosystem services and prioritize open space acquisitions in the central Puget Sound. On the Natural Capital Project, Jenny uses INVEST software to model ecosystem services at Department of Defense installations to inform their resource management and land use policies. She's adapting and applying the terrestrial models to assess habitat quality for species concern and adjacent to the installations under various land use scenarios. Her primary research interests are in landscape ecology and conservation biology. She has extensive experience conducting research with threatened and rare species and is especially interested in combining field and qualitative methods to address applied questions in the conservation and management of biodiversity. With that, the floor is theirs.
So thank you, Brian, and thank you for inviting us to present today. We have two presentations, so Jeff and I will present first, and then we'll go right into John and Jenny's presentation. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge Steve Whitney. I don't think Steve is here today, of the Bullitt Foundation. He's been a guiding light and also our critical funder for the Regional Open Space Strategy, for which we're ever grateful. In his 1918 book, Steep Trails, John Muir wrote this about the Puget Sound region. The scene is enchanting. Water and sky, mountain and forest, clad in sunshine and clouds, are composed in landscapes sublime in magnitude, yet exquisitely fine and fresh and full of glad, rejoicing life. There's a full paragraph I could go on, but we will run out of time. We have inherited this landscape, and it's one that provides a multitude of ecosystem services, and one that we hope that our project, the Regional Open Space Strategy, will preserve, enhance, heal, and help to make available its restorative, environmental, recreational, and resource benefits to all for many generations to come. But we're losing this natural infrastructure, and we're losing it fast. You've seen this map before, a little bit different dates, that if we continue as we have been, then it's predicted that the level of urbanization in the region by 2050 will look like this. And in that case, we'll all be coping with the loss of ecological viability, loss of biodiversity, with degraded water, loss of fish farm and forest production, and dealing with flood and other environmental hazards. And these will all be exacerbated by climate change, which we heard about earlier, how at least 10% for stormwater. And of course, that will result in an overall loss of quality of life and reduced access to our prized natural and recreational amenities. And these are resources that we already don't equitably share. So we need to devise how to address conservation and regeneration of these landscapes at the region and watershed scales now, before they're lost. And Steve is always making this point to us. We need to do this now. And as part of that, we need to integrate the conservation strategies for our forest, farm, and aquatic resource lands. We need to coordinate our ecological priorities. So here we have mapped priorities for salmon conservation by the Trust for Public Land, and then priorities for other species by the Nature Conservancy, but one without the recognition of the other. We need to pair conservation priorities with other human dimensions, such as regionally critical missing links in the trail system and other dimensions that Kathy had brought up this morning. And we need to ensure that everyone has access to the health and quality of life benefits that open spaces provide, and that it accompanies and supports the compact development that is going to be required to house our growing population in ways that will reduce our land and our water and our climate footprint. So in 2010, we began to explore how we might develop a strategy or a set of strategies to take a regional approach to open space conservation and enhancement. So the ROS, you see what that is, aims to conserve and enhance open space systems to contribute to the ecological, economic, recreational, and aesthetic vitality of the region. And as a coalition, we aim to position green infrastructure alongside transportation and other foundational investments as a necessary dedication of public and private resources to shape future development and ensure community well-being. That's a mouthful. Those are Jeff's words I borrowed. So we're working to first establish a set of key strategies to achieve an interconnected open space system linking 7 watersheds. We're working to complement existing conservation planning and identifying key actions and acquisitions to conserve and enhance the region's natural green infrastructure. We are, that's the third bullet, we're working to form a strategy to help reframe the region's approach to conservation by identifying where ecological interests intersect with and reinforce other civic objectives. And we are trying to develop mechanisms to demonstrate the value of green infrastructure to our region. And this is a lot where ecosystem services come in. And so we're exploring tools to make what we call the value proposition for open space conservation. Just keep that. So that means synthesizing GIS and other analyses at the watershed and at the regional scale to facilitate a more coordinated priority setting. And finally, it's not just about our studies, but it's about building an engaged, collaborative, and mobilized constituency for open space. So those are some pretty big goals. We're still not daunted by them. And of course, we're building on the shoulders of giants upon past and current regional planning. So the Puget Sound Partnership that Kathy talked about this morning has an action agenda for salmon and Puget Sound recovery. The Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2040, which actually includes policies for open space. They haven't done anything with open space really yet, but one policy is to identify, preserve, and enhance significant regional open spaces and linkages across jurisdictional boundaries. And the Puget Sound Regional Council works with the same 4 counties that the ROS is working on. So we have a very tight relationship there. Of course, if you've been in the region for very long, you know about the Cascade Agenda that was put forth through the Cascade Land Conservancy, now Forterra, to envision our desired region in 100 years. That was completed in about 2005. And the Mountains to Sound Greenway, which has provided really an excellent model for a regional connected system that stretches from Seattle to east of the Cascades, that's protecting resource and ecological lands while supporting local economies and providing recreational opportunities. Again, a very holistic kind of a vision. And we're working with multiple agencies and organizations who are our active partners on our executive committee and on our technical advisory committees. So we have significant representation from local, region, state, and federal lands at the federal levels from all 4 of these counties. That's King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Kitsap in central Puget Sound. And there are over 100 organizations that have been involved with our technical and advisory committees. So in 2012, through a participatory process with these agencies and organizations, we completed the preliminary comprehensive strategy for Central Puget Sound, which is sort of a roadmap for our work. And in that process, we enlisted expertise in each of the 4 areas that help us to describe our broad definition of what is open space. People are always saying, well, you need to describe. What do you mean by open space? Well, we really mean it all. Healthy ecosystems, rural and resource working lands, urban and community development, and recreation and trails. And then through that engagement of diverse interests, we defined our desired open space system. What would the qualities be? We said it's one that is robust and resilient. I'm going to read around these. That's connected, it's diverse, it's coordinated, it's stewarded, it's equitable, it's multifunctional. Big vision. And then the roadmap for these 4 counties, and with 7 watersheds, identified prototypical strategies such as prioritizing at-risk resource lands, targeting new parks to relieve open space deserts, integrating Puget Sound Regional Council's transportation-oriented trail plan with county recreation plans to get maximum benefit, connecting ecologically linked open space systems for greater resilience, and ensuring fair access to resources for all populations. Those were just some of the ideas that came out. And we really embrace this principle of layering landscape systems and finding the actions that provide multiple benefits so that we can get the most benefit from our investments. And actually, green stormwater infrastructure is a great example of that because, yes, we get stormwater, but we also get habitat, we get aesthetic, we get social benefits. We could talk about that a lot more. Some of you have had in my hydrology course. We established the goal of using tools such as GIS and ecosystem service models to find those convergences and the potential ecosystem services that targeted open space investments would yield. So we established a process, a kind of geodesignish process, I would say, to achieve those and other goals. And we'd started in 2010 with scoping to answer the question, is a regional open space strategy even needed? We heard yes, it was. So then in 2012, probably actually 2011, we started the preliminary comprehensive strategy, established these executive and technical committees with the PCS, preliminary comprehensive strategy, intended to serve as a guide to identify and prioritize regionally scaled projects, acquisitions, and connections, and to provide a sort of template for approaching each of the 7 watersheds. Those are the WASs, the watershed open space strategies, to build on local efforts, opportunities, and needs at the watershed scale, and especially to help them build the regional system. And you'll hear more about our first WAS from John Owen. So next I'm going to turn this over to Jeff Raker, our senior planner, and he's going to let you know how we're continuing to advance at the regional level and how we're applying GIS and geodesign concepts.
So before I describe how it connects directly to geodesign, I just also wanted to say that the ROS as an organization or an initiative is really echoing a lot of elements that are happening in regional conservation around the country. You'll see that Cascade Land Conservancy recently became Forterra, and they moved from a traditional land conservation to embrace broader community development as a multi-benefit approach of achieving their objectives. Similarly, Puget Sound Partnership is connecting ecosystem recovery and salmon recovery to broader community, human dimensions and community objectives. And so the ROS is part of this as well. And we are setting the governance and finance and social capital and analytical structures necessary to help facilitate and guide this multi-benefit approach. So as part of that, and you probably cannot read all of this, but the Ecosystem Services Committee is a group that we've brought together led by Earth Economics and involving a number of experts looking at ecosystem service valuation. They are charged with building our understanding of the natural and community benefits that can be derived from the regional open spaces landscape, and to start to frame out a way of evaluating how we can optimize the ecosystem service benefits from this effort. Now, they're aligning this, though, with a broader conversation in which we're addressing key regional challenges. So ecosystem service valuation, for instance, doesn't touch upon social equity in a very effective manner. It doesn't touch upon human health in a very effective manner. And some components of the economic development picture are missing. Similarly, to address the adaptive nature of climate change and biodiversity, we have to look at new metrics and new ways of approaching the issue. And so we've put together some task forces to support their work. So for biodiversity, it's led by the Woodland Park Zoo. For human health, we have somebody from Seattle Children's. And a number of expertise that are connected to that. They're tasked with developing white papers that will do three things. One is to start to identify the challenge and the role of open space investments in confronting that challenge, to identify metrics for how the region can advance our ability to address these issues using investments in green infrastructure and open space, and to outline 5 to 7 actions that can be taken within a short term, within 12 to 18 months. And they may be policy directives, they may be an absolutely key gap in analytical investigation that is necessary to address, but they'll outline what those 5 to 7 things are that really will advance the discussion for how to orient our open space investments so that they capitalize and address these challenges and help build a community around it as well, so that our investments in environmental objectives are really interconnected with the community's objectives. So what the Ecosystem Services Committee has done to start is really at a very coarse level, we're looking at land cover, and we're identifying, okay, what is this regional open space geography? And so obviously it is evergreen forest, deciduous forest, it's agricultural lands, it's certain elements of urban open space, and we're trying to get that reflected using geospatial tools. And I should do a nod to Tim, because the geography department has been kind enough to lend us students in support of augmenting this sort of information for each watershed that we invest in. So this Ecosystem Services Committee, as I was indicating, is charged with expanding on the more traditional approach to ecosystem service valuation and starting to bring in issues for climate, biodiversity, social equity and justice, human health, and economic development. And the idea is that we'll be able to highlight on the landscape where there might be hot spots for investment that support those objectives and optimize the benefits associated with them. We haven't necessarily gotten far along in developing and really evaluating the level of protection or the level of versus the level of vulnerability and trying to assess where this might help. But we intend to down the line. So how does ROS relate to geodesign? Well, my understanding of geodesign is that it helps us address a complex problem that is involving social, economic, and ecological considerations that really require collaborative effort. And it does that by using geospatial information and combining that with some component of decision support and integrating it with the sort of decision-making within a particular geography as well. Bryant Ralston this morning indicated that there is intention and intervention, and we are establishing intention primarily from the regional scale by exploring those 5 sort of regional challenges that I identified, and setting a frame for evaluating watershed-scale initiated efforts that John will describe in a moment. We're synthesizing GIS at those 2 scales and trying to articulate what the current system provides, mapping out what the open space services will provide. And ultimately, the purpose is to bring about a more coordinated priority setting that will really encompass this broader set of services that need to be derived from the landscape. So this is from it's from an Earth Economics report that referenced a report prior that was done at Stanford, and it's showing that they've identified certain hotspots on the landscape. Well, we're similarly trying to do this, so synthesizing GIS, the watershed and regional scale, to really more clearly articulate the current system, to map these broader sets of services that are, or benefits that are provided by nature and the trade-offs associated, and to facilitate more coordinated priority setting, as I was saying. So the next steps in this process are to really start to flesh out those task force white papers, those white papers that do this exploration to how to address those regional challenges, to continue advancing on this ecosystem service valuation and open space system assessment. We're launching a website and a communication strategy this summer that will be up and running and provide a framework for better collaboration across expertise. And then we have launched work in the Puyallup White watershed, and we are now set to launch work in the Snohomish in the late summer or fall of this year. But more importantly, what's interesting about this work is it's going to be connected into the governance structure of the region. So we are forming a group made of Puget Sound Regional Council, Puget Sound Partnership, to really highlight where these types of broad community objectives can be brought into decision-making when it comes to making investments. We hope to have a finalized strategy by June of 2015 in which we'll outline how this work moves forward, whether it's in a division of a particular agency, such as the Regional Council or the Puget Sound Partnership, or its own entity, or an alliance of nonprofits. And this will incorporate what we've learned from the watershed scale and start to look at an action and implementation plan. And the overall objective is to finalize a strategy and analytical testing that really guides the region in how to fulfill this optimization of benefits across interests and position green infrastructure, as Nancy has indicated, alongside with transportation and other types of major investments, and trying to really highlight how we can do that and embed it in our community's objectives. So now I'll turn it over to John Owen and Jenny Duggan to explore how this is manifesting itself at the watershed scale.